This is the outside view for Women's Cricket Zone. Adam Collins, Isabelle, Westbury. They've done it again, the Australians. 5 times world champions now. A daunting total. They made 184 for 4 with the bat. They defended it with ease, bowling at India for 99. India didn't even bat out their overs, Izzy. It felt like Meg Lanning was spot on at the toss. Bat first, make runs and put on the squeeze.
I feel as though every time I come on here with you, my expression is of sort of exasperated despair. This idea that Australia were vulnerable, that they weren't in great form coming to the tournament, that they were beatable, and we thought, great, this could be an upset, this could be perhaps momentous for world cricket. An India win, we saw what happened to the Indian men when winning the World Cup in 1983, in 2007 the T20 one, and we thought perhaps maybe it could happen here. Australia had almost done their job of filling the MCG. They got to the final, bit iffy to get there, but my goodness, they were good. I hate to say it, they really were. Yeah,
what a clinical performance it was. I mean, in front of 86,500 people as well. They filled the G. Melbourne didn't break the world record, but the G was well and truly filled some no-shows, which meant they didn't quite get to that mark. But the reason I mentioned that off the top is there's a fair degree of pressure you carry into a game like that. It's not like these footballers that play on the MCG in front of 60, 70,000 people week in, week out. It's a big step up, and it felt as though Elisa Healy, 3 boundaries in the first over, she settled. By contrast, Deepti Sharma, 3 full tosses in the first over, she didn't, and it was emblematic of the trajectory the two teams went on after that.
Really weirdly, and I don't think you'd have thought of this at the beginning of the tournament necessarily, I think India felt a lot more pressure in front of that crowd than Australia did. Okay, Australia have the kind of having to perform in front of their home crowd, but I think the pressure for them was getting to the final, because it had been such a sort of a certainty coming into the tournament, and then they'd fumbled. They were 3 down for 20 against Sri Lanka. You kind of felt they could have gone out of the tournament then. It's a bit like England men in the World Cup last year here in England, and you felt that once Australia had got to the final, there was this gnawing little feeling away at me beforehand that you thought, well, they're probably going to absolutely smash it. And someone like Elisa Healy, who's, let's be honest, had a pretty barren run going into the tournament, slow start. My goodness me, that top order, Healy, Mooney, Lanning, unbeatable at the moment, evidently.
Well, absolutely. I mean, Healy, 3 boundaries off the top, put the foot down in the power play where they made 49 runs. She gets to a half century in 30 balls, then hits 3 consecutive sixes. I mean, you're thinking for a minute there, they're going to make 220 and Healy's going to make 130 of them. In the end, she ends up being the first wicket to fall when the score, I think, was 115, but the job was done. And again, Healy feels as though she's a sort of player where the higher the degree of difficulty, the more bullish and bold she'll be, and that suited her on the big stage.
Oh, absolutely. And I think what's the most important for Australia is the way in which that partnership works. You saw Mooney, who again has a capacity to hit out, not getting flustered at all by the fact that, right, Healy's on a hot one right here. I'll just nodle it around and then get into my groove. And then, of course, she really anchored the innings with her own 70-odd. But and conversely, I think India, the moment sort of a quick wicket fell and something didn't quite work, it really impacted the player at the non-strikers end. There were no partnership to speak of whatsoever. And Australia, you just feel that they have that contingency plan. They had to put it into practice against Sri Lanka in the group stages. India, perhaps you could argue, didn't really have that challenge going through to the finals. They had an unbeaten streak coming into it. They obviously had a bye against England for the washout, and it worked extremely well in Australia's favour.
Yeah, it had been a long time since India played. They didn't play the last group game, so they rostered off, and then they had the sort of the washout semi-final. So they didn't quite have that build-up that Australia had. You mentioned Beth Mooney. She finishes the tournament with more runs than anyone in a World T20, named player of the tournament, an unbeaten 78 in the final, as she does so often in the Women's Big Bash League, batted through the entire innings. So that foundation was always there. We see in T20 cricket, when wickets fall in a hurry, the run rate falls off a cliff. Well, that never happened with Australia because Mooney was there from the outset. And, I think a lot of us who watched her closely from the start in the WBBL, you were one of those, Izzy, when we were out in Australia in the first year, we saw her and we're like, we love the way she goes about it. She's so disciplined. She rarely takes on the long boundary, trying to hit sixes. She hits the ball along the carpet. Almost an old school, new school kind of player, has both gears and gets rewarded today.
Oh, absolutely. And actually, I think one of the real things of the final that sort of made it for me was the innings break, when Australia obviously had a wonderful total. Beth Mooney was a big part of it. We had Michael Clarke, who, 2015, had lifted the trophy, the 50-over trophy on home soil at the same time as the Women's BBL was just starting. So this is when Mooney was really just starting. And to think that you had Michael Clarke there interviewing Beth Mooney and Beth Mooney sort of going at the end, yeah, thank you, mate. The way in which the world has turned in the space of 5 years is really incredible. And Mooney, I think, going back to, again, that 2015 BBL BBL, the start of it, she had sort of Grace Harris at the top there, who's a huge hitter, and you always felt as though she was so unflustered. She was comfortable with whoever is at the other end of the crease.
Exactly.
And I think, I mean, all plaudits go to Healy, but she is just a phenomenal talent who can come off when the day calls for it. But Mooney's consistency throughout the tournament, her adaptability, and the way in which she can partner anyone, and also she's not one of the big three sort of spotlight players, the Perrys, the Lannings, the Healys. She's happy to stay in the background and then does the business when she's called upon. What an asset to Australia.
I love the fact that people at the MCG tonight were wearing huge Beth Mooney masks. I think, kind of like that Michael Clark moment, it says a fair bit. It kind of didn't matter that Lanning didn't come off and Gardner didn't come off and Hayes, because the foundation was laid. It is copybook. It's the model to bat first and make big runs, and that's exactly what they did. The reverse was true for India. They lost their 4 best players inside the power play. In addition to Bhatia, who was out of the game via a concussion, she got down low and failed to make contact with a sweep off Jess Jonathan. So you don't often see a concussion caused by a spinner, but it was the angle that it got her on, which was quite nasty and caused some bleeding as well. So she took no further part in the game. But the big guns, Verma, was out third ball of the game. And Verma, of course, was the player who dropped Healy in the covers in the first over of the bowling innings. So, I mean, without wanting to heap blame on Verma, the top player in the world at the moment, 16 years of age, what a tournament she's had. But you could see how gutted she was, sitting on the bench, head in hand, head underneath her shirt, just distraught at not being able to deliver in the World Cup final. But you've got to be measured with these things, don't you, Izzy? She's 16 years old. She's going to play in many more major global tournament finals, and having the experience of today can only be a good thing.
Oh, absolutely. And I think as well, what's really encouraging for India is the fact that arguably their 2 best players, or you can put in Rodriguez as well, but Harmanpreet Kaur and Smriti Mandana have had pretty poor tournaments.
Shockers, yeah.
I mean, Kaur's, I think she scored 30 runs in 4 innings. And the fact they've managed to get to the final without those sort of big guns firing, well, that wouldn't have happened even 2-3 years ago.
Yeah, well, Mandana hauled out early, as did Harmanpreet Kaur on her birthday. It's also Izzy's birthday today, I should add. It's her 30th birthday on International Women's Day. No better day for her to celebrate it, watching the Women's World Cup final. But Harmanpreet and Mandana full. Rodriguez, you already mentioned, and Verma off the top, the retired hurt. Essentially 5 for not many, and the wheels didn't so much fall off. It just kind of creaked all the way to the finish line. Leading into this final, Izzy, we talked about Megan Schutt and Jess Jonathan being Meg Lanning's bankers. She can always throw the ball to those two, and I think that bowling second or electing to defend a total, what she's essentially saying is, I trust my big gun bowlers. And Schutt and Jonathan, they just land the ball in a shoebox time and time again. One left arm, one right arm, and 7 wickets between them. An outstanding performance. Oh,
Megan Schutt in particular, over the last 2-3 years, she's been right on top of the rankings. Yep. She's, as you say, an absolute banker, and I think we almost forget, with all the batting that's gone on for Australia in that World Cup final, Megan Schutt got 4 wickets and absolutely nailed it. I mean, in any other circumstance, you sort of say she's very unlucky not to get the player of the final. I think, Australia do have that all-round game that they can turn to when things aren't going well, but when things are going well, they get scores like that.
So Australia win the trophy for the 5th time. In terms of the legacy of this competition, and we'll cast forward a little bit, Izzy, to our team of the tournament in our next video, but I think when we look back at this competition, we'll see that administrators were bold with their ambition, especially with the final, the way they promoted and marketed this competition. Remember, the Big Bash has only been going for 5 years for women, and yet they had sufficient strength to put on a show like tonight. This is the start of something.
Oh yeah, I think one point I would say is that there's been a lot of chat about sort of proving haters wrong or doubters wrong. I don't think there was any doubt. I think that when this was announced, a year ago today, that they were going to try and fill the MCG, it wasn't so much, you're not going to get to the 100,000. It was, you're going to get a really big crowd. It's going to be bigger than probably anything we've seen, or near enough. I think there were no doubters either that standalone tournaments don't work anymore. I do think we're at a stage where it's appreciated that this can happen, and with the intent of Cricket Australia and the funding and the resources and the infrastructure, the planning, I don't think there were doubters, if that makes sense. But it's still a phenomenal achievement nonetheless.
Yeah, that's right. When they said they were going to fill Lords for the Women's World Cup in 2017, there were doubters. People said you couldn't possibly do it. And of course, England made the final. They did, with the exception of the members, did fill the ground on that occasion. The G, 87,000 people at the G. I've been to the Melbourne Cricket Ground for my whole life. That's essentially filling it. There were some tickets that didn't go used today, but a mighty achievement, a landmark day in women's sport. Indeed, a landmark day in Australian sport and for women's cricket. And Izzy, it's been a joy to talk about this competition throughout with you on the Outside View View. Again, we'll come back with our team of the tournament. But in terms of the final, that's us signing off on the Outside View for Women's Cricket Zone. Make sure you follow them on all the platforms. They're always there. They're a fantastic website. We'll talk soon.